I went to Howard with Diddy, Mark Pitts, Fonnie Willis, who's the DA in Georgia. She was one of my high school best friends. He had punched me in my face and just started stomping me out like I was a nigga in the street. What I want people to walk away with is to know that God is real. I'm an uptown girl. I'm born and raised in Washington, D.C.
Woo, DMV, what's up?
Yes, I have one sister, Faye Anika, you know, two sets of parents, my dad and stepmom, my mom and stepdad. My dad and stepmom were the primary parents. Went to go see my mom and stepdad every other weekend. Grew up in D.C., grew up in a political family, and went to Howard, found myself, partied, got kicked out, and found myself in New York with the guy I was dating at the time.
Awesome. We're gonna go a little back. I want to go back to DC, and I don't want to start like early childhood. I want to take it to 15 years old.
Okay.
It makes sense. You come from a political family,
Yes.
but you were appointed as a youth official in Washington D.C. under Mayor Marion Barry's first term. You were going into schools talking to your peers about drugs, alcohol, and you know when I'm reading this and I'm looking at your history, what 15-year-old is out there basically being a community advocate and caring about her people so much? So what drew you to the mayor and doing that type of work?
What drew me to Mayor Marion Barry, the youth, I was in a camp called the Marion Barry Youth Leadership Program. And during those camp sessions in the summertime, we would be able to select what kind of program we wanted to go out and participate in. And so I chose that because at the time I had two aunts, well, one aunt, God may she rest in peace. She was on drugs really, really bad, caused a major imbalance in our family. And sometimes in the summer when I went to go visit my maternal grandparents, if I had anything of value, I had to sleep in it, or it was gonna be pawned in the morning or missing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, you know, that really hit home for me. And she, you know, she was my favorite aunt. But, you know, I was like, you know, well, let me just choose this route and go from there based on my experience. Yeah.
Yeah. Talk about the famous Woodrow Wilson Senior High School. What kind of student were you? How was that? Give me the details. Tell me about the high school days, the young Lynn.
So in high school, so my dad, you know, he had some really tight reins on myself and my sister. I was a little wild, you know what I mean? And it was a public school. It was an international public school. So living in Washington, D.C., you know, all of the dignitaries, their children went to that high school as well. So I came from a very well-rounded international public high school. Yeah.
You said growing up you didn't really have clear dreams or aspirations. What do you think your life was going to be like back then, and what were your goals before the industry found you?
I had no idea what I wanted to be when I grew up. When I was almost finishing high school, my dad was like, you have two options since you don't know what you want to do. You can do the military or what was the other thing? I don't even think he was giving me any other option.
Straight military.
It was like, you need some discipline. You need to go to the military. You know what I mean? I was like, no, I'm going to go to college. And I think he was kind of like, if you get in, you know, because, you know, it's really important. It's not just to have good enough to have good grades. You have to be part of a lot of organizations, you know, especially if you're getting B's and C's. It's like, what makes you stand out from the rest? But thank God I did, you know, I was a part of a lot of organizations in high school, and that afforded me the ability to stay out longer after school on a weekday. And so I loaded up on those programs, and yeah.
A lot of people don't understand how stressful it is for like high schoolers and kids. Like going through the application process now with my kid is like, it's crazy. And I'm talking about just to get into high school. Like the extracurricular activities, like these kids are kind of like zombies where it's like such a big melting pot of competition. So I feel you on that. But you had your turning point, and eventually I know we talked about it already, probation, and we get kicked out. But you did get into Howard University. What was that like for your family, and what was that moment for your dad when you kind of said, I got in? I
got in. Well, originally I wanted to go to Hampton or Maryland Eastern Shore, something like that. But my dad was like, whoa, Nelly, no, you gonna stay, you gonna stay right here in DC with us. And I had my mom advocate for me because at Howard, it was a black college. They weren't too organized back then. I wanted to be able to stay on campus, and my dad was like, no, you're gonna stay in here and at home. And living on campus was an extra expense, but by the grace of God, I was able to get on campus and really live that authentic, black college lifestyle.
Yeah. And I know even though, the probation, all that stuff happened, there was a very powerful moment that happened for you at Howard University, which I always tell people college is not just about grades. It's mostly more about connections and experiences and the people you meet. And you read a book called Personal Touch by Terrie Williams.
Yes.
Talk to us about you reading that book at Howard and how that changed everything for you.
Okay, so when I was at Howard, still having no direction, my then best friend Kim took me to, a guy by the name of Mark Pitts. We call him Gucci. At the time, he was managing the Notorious B.I.G., and I was going to Howard with him. I went to Howard with Diddy, Mark Pitts, Fonnie Willis, who's the DA in Georgia. She was one of my high school best friends. I think Taraji went there as well, but I didn't really know her. The younger Wayne's brothers were going there. Derek Angeletti, the mad rapper. We were locked and loaded in terms of modern day entertainment executives. At the time, Mark Pitts was managing the Notorious B.I.G. I had never really heard hip hop because in Washington, D.C., it was all go-go music. And so I always thought that go-go music was just original. It wasn't until I went to Howard until I realized that they were taking that music from other songs
Wow.
and remixing them.
Wow.
I didn't know. Yeah, so I went to a Notorious B.I.G. Biggie concert with Tracy Lee. They had a song called Party and Bull, and the rest is history. I fell in love with hip hop. Found myself as a club kid going to clubs every single night, flunked out of school. My father was like, you ain't got to go home. You don't have to come back here. He gave me $20. And the guy that I was dating at the time, China, he was an aspiring music producer. His brother is Robert Dompu Cummins, who was also managing the Notorious B.I.G. with Mark Pitts. Pooh also was managing Foxy Brown and a slew of other people. And I wanted to be down with them, but I just didn't know how. And so my then boyfriend, China, gave me a book called The Personal Touch, Everything You Need to Succeed in Today's Fast-Paced Business World. And in that book, I realized she was a publicist. And I was like, I want to be a publicist, and I wrote her a letter because we didn't have internet, asked her for an internship. She lived in New York. I was already technically homeless. And so the rest is history.
Yeah, so you wrote that letter and she hired you.
Yeah. Well,
Give me the details. Come on.
It wasn't, she didn't hire me right away. I came up for the interview in New York. And when I came up for the interview, they hired me. And on the first day of the internship, they called me into the office and said they overhired 4 interns and that they wanted to send me back home to DC. And I was like, okay, but then something just said, no, go back in there and tell them you can't go back home because you ain't got no place to go. You know what I mean? And so in that hallway, I ran into Terrie's assistant, which I didn't know she was Terrie's assistant. Her name was Malak Compton Rock. Well, Malak Compton, she ended up marrying Chris Rock. And I let her know my dilemma. She went in there and spoke on my behalf, and I stayed.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So Terrie Wilson at the time, one of the most most powerful black publicists in America at the time.
Yes.
I know she had Eddie Murphy, Chris Rock,
Yes.
Boyz II Men, Essence magazines,
Yes.
you name it.
Yes.
What do a person young, Howard, in the scene, well, you don't know that you got this, you already have what a publisher's dream, right? Mm-hmm. Connections, right? Mm-hmm. But you're really in it, y'all young, so you don't know what everybody's gonna be yet.
Yes.
But you watching what it could be like, how to lead, what this business is really like, the professionalism it really takes.
Right.
Tell me what you're going through your mind. One, you're not from New York, so you live in a big city. You live in a city where, oh my God, the era that a lot of us dream we could have lived in. Mm-hmm. And you're learning from the best in the business. Talk to me about that process. Give me the details of that.
It was very overwhelming because I was coming from a sheltered household. I wanted to be a publicist because I like to connect people and make things happen. But I had no idea of the magnitude of the work that it took to be involved to do the work. I just wanted to be in the moment. I just wanted to be a part of, entertainment history in some form or fashion. And then from there, it became a passion.
I read a lot of books. You hear a lot about like college. Obviously, I work in medicine, so education is very important to me. I'm probably like your dad when it comes to my kids, straight and narrow. Like, follow this, life will be okay.
And I get it now.
But there's something about being in the presence of greatness that a classroom or a book can't teach you. I want you to talk more about just watching Terrie day to day. Do you remember like interactions of her with like her clients or Chris Rock and like what was it like learning how to problem solve and deal with a lot of egos and people who demand the attention that they earn, that they deserve?
Yes, I watched Terrie talk to Sean Combs during the City College event, just giving her the pros and cons on his approach and what he should do. During that situation, I was privy to sit in on conversations with her and Johnny Cochran when he was going through the court proceedings with O.J. Simpson, and I was just really in awe of this. I was like a fly on the wall, and it was just an amazing experience, even from her and Susan Taylor, who was the one of the founding partners of Essence magazine, them sitting at a conference table designing what is now the Essence Music Festival. We also have the Essence Music Awards, them getting Oprah on the phone to ask her to be honored at the Essence Awards. They don't have the Essence Awards now. And then watching them put it together, from nothing, and then seeing it turn into what now, 20 years later, is a mega event, annual event platform. It was just amazing, I
think that's like watching work and getting lessons at the same time, being able to get paid and get those lessons that
hands-on
people pay
experience.
Thousands of dollars for is kind of crazy.
Hands-on experience, you know?
It makes sense why you are who you are and the things you're doing, and eventually from Terrie you end up going to Entertainment label, right? Records, which you co-own with Notorious B.I.G.
Yes.
At Epic and Sony Records. Tell me about that. What was that work like? How did you shift from publicist, and you're still doing publicist work, but now to being an owner and being engulfed in this hip hop era?
So I got fired from the Terrie Williams Agency because I was still partying and doing too much. And then walking home from unemployment in Brooklyn. I moved to Brooklyn because I fell in love with brownstones. We don't have brownstones like that in DC. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna rent an apartment in the brownstone and be like the Cosbys. But I had no idea I had moved into the hood. And I moved on Grand and Gates, which was around the corner from where the Notorious B.I.G. lived. His brothers, the entire record label, who were all, hustlers at the time, they were developing, their music careers surrounding it around the Notorious B.I.G. And Leote Blacknor, at the time, who was Diddy's personal assistant, let me know that she was going over to Entertainment on Diaz. And I was like, I think they're my neighbors, And so when I went in to do the interview, they were like, we know her. Okay, she's hired. And just like that, this industry is based on relationships.
Basically starting from scratch.
Basically starting from scratch, basically taking everything that I've learned and really owning it and making it happen, And I went through a period of severe insecurity because I'm like, I know how to do this job. These artists are really big. They're asking for really big things. I don't know if I could do it, So I was kind of like in a cocoon process, turning into a butterfly. And there were a lot of things happening. Those are some really tough street guys trying to be corporate guys. You know what I mean? There was a time where, it was Christmas and we were getting Christmas bonuses. I was excited about that. And then here comes dropping off a shoebox on my desk. It was like full of ones. And I was like, what do you call it? I just felt like this is disrespectful. You know what I mean? But it was like, but I'll take it. On at the time, or they weren't really signed. They were not active on the label when I worked there, and neither was Kim. So my main artist focus was Cameron and Charlie Baltimore. And then the label folded because we were young kids with a lot of money that didn't know what we were doing. I had moved to Edgewater, New Jersey. I was at a car wash. I ran into Big Joe. He was a well-known celebrity bodyguard. He had worked with Foxy Brown, the Notorious B.I.G., Mike Tyson. I already had Mike Tyson as a client, and as a personal client for their record label, Iron Mike Entertainment. And Big Joe was like, I got this group, Dipset. I want you to do their publicity. And I was like, okay, cool. I know Cameron. We had a disconnect because we hadn't seen each other. I let him know that I worked at Entertainment on Diaz. He gave me the address to meet him in a few days, and I went and met up with them. And it was a great reunion with Cameron, and then I met Jewels. Awesome.
So I know during that era, besides Miss Williams, there's not many black women dominating that space, and it's male dominant, gangster, aggressive.
Yeah.
Like you said, hood guys who are gonna be themselves, but have all of this power and wealth and this aura that people enjoy. How was it like going through the day as a woman, who's also outside, who's also trying to live her life?
So the only female thing, definitely was the only female, definitely the only female on the road with them. They didn't treat me like I was a female.
You was one of the guys.
I was one of the guys, My first experience on the road, twin Jewels' brother was like, where are you going with that suitcase? Yeah. I was like, I'm going with y'all. Like, are we going on the road, right? We going on the road? He was like, no, get a book bag. Matter of fact, go back home, get a book bag. Everything we do, you pack it in there, one pair of underwear, a shirt, some soap, put them jeans back on, because if the heat gets hot and we need to run up out of there, guess what? You have your stuff on you already. So when we were on the road, we had like themed backpacks. Like I think he had a SpongeBob. I had a Hello Kitty book bag. Everybody in the entourage had their own book bag, and our entire lives were in the book bag was when we were on tour.
A lot of shopping, huh?
No shopping, because you can, if it fits in the book bag,
that's it.
Cool, but if it doesn't, you don't bring it. And it proved to be a great strategy, because there'll be times we're in a city and the promoter is not paying the back end. We got to get out of there. The fans don't know why we're not performing, why we're leaving. Now they want to shoot up the van,
Wow. That's so crazy, because the next thing I want to talk about is you go from there to Rough Riders.
Rough Riders had more corporate structure.
Oh,
actually,
that's
Rough Riders was actually before entertainment, but that was more like a contracted publicist type of thing. Rough Riders was developing a visual department, and they wanted me to create the media packets and media EPKs, press kits for Eve. They had a group called Parlay. DMX was already established. So it was more so a lot of writing for them and on-set publicity for media that would show up when they were shooting their music videos.
I know in 2011 you founded something called the Black and Blue Foundation.
Yes.
Right? And I know you talked about being a survivor of a domestic violence attack. And there's not many interviews where you do talk about it. And I don't need you to go into details about the event. If you do feel comfortable sharing about it, that's your choice. If not, I want to just know more about the foundation. What are you guys doing? How is it serving individuals of domestic violence? Because we're going to get back into the stories, and you being a publisher is great, but I also want to separate and show the community work that you're doing, which is also part of being a publicist, right?
Absolutely, yes.
I think it's yoked with community aspect and being advocates for things that are happening in the world. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the Black and Blue Foundation was a foundation that I established. I was dating a music producer from the Bronx.
Oh, man. I apologize on his behalf.
And he had gotten into some legal problems, and I helped him get out of those legal situations. And then after that, I was like, you know, we're done. You know, we crossed that bridge. I stuck it out with you. We're done. And you know, the best thing to do when you're trying to get out of a relationship is to get another relationship. Okay, so which was a mess. And he wasn't really accepting of that. You know, I think that, you know, he had a life where he just had never had anybody that was supportive of him. And I was on a date with my new boo. I was on a double date. And it was with my new boo at the time.
Was the date in the Bronx?
No, it was in Hackensack, New Jersey.
I was like, you can't do it in the Bronx now.
It was in Hackensack, New Jersey. It was a double date. Twin Santana's brothers, one of my best friends, and he and his wife were like, we have somebody for you, you know, come bowling with us. And so we went bowling. And I guess the person that I was dating at the time, Twitter was new. And at the time when Twitter was new, we were all doing too much, telling too much of our business on Twitter. Oh, we're bowling, we're having fun over here, you know. And so my ex, you know, caught wind of my location based on Twitter and came to the bowling alley. And when he came through the bowling alley, Twin and the guy that I was dating, they went to the bar to get us some drinks. And then Crystal needed to use the restroom. So I was by myself when he was coming into the bowling alley. And so to circumvent the situation, I said, oh, no. Let's take this outside. You know, I don't want, you know, any drama or anything. So I said, let's go talk outside. You know, why are you here? And then next thing you know, he was like, I know you're on a date. You know, just come with me. Let's just have a conversation. And I was like, you know, this relationship is over. And then, you know, next thing I know, he had punched me in my face and just started stomping me out like I was a nigga in the street, you know what I mean? And when my date and my friends, well, they're like families to me, realized that I had been gone for a long time, they started to look for me. And when they ran outside, I was kind of almost a little unconscious. He just disappeared, ran out into the night. Yeah.
I'm so sorry you had to go through that. And I know that obviously, you know, you were proactive in trying to create a company to make sure other people don't feel that pain that you felt through. If you feel comfortable, what was it like navigating just relationships in your day-to-day after? I know something that traumatic can cause PTSD. It can make you look over your shoulder. I don't know the sequence of when he got arrested or if he did get arrested, but like, how was that the days after it happened? You know?
So just the process of pressing charges, the process of calling my father, you know, to say that this happened to me, you know what I mean? And for my family, you know, I'm up here by myself, you know, to have to come up to New Jersey and go through this process with me, filing the police report, going through the process of having him convicted. It was a 6-month process. It was very discouraging. And the misconception about domestic violence was that when I was in there filling out my paperwork, the victims were all male. I was like the only female. They were bruised, scratched, black eyes, you know, men trying to show up to see their children, not wanting to be with the women anymore, stuff like that. So with the creation of the Black and Blue Foundation, that was for women, but now that the foundation is kind of like on the shelf and on hold, because I'm starting to see that trend a lot more, where men are more so the victims than women. And so I gotta figure out how I'm gonna start incorporating the men into these situations as well, into my platform as well.
I think that's very powerful. And yeah, there is a lot of domestic violence that do happen to men. I think
Yeah.
something on both
I
sides.
don't really understand, like, also, like, I don't have any biological children. I understand how women with children, you can't just pick up and leave. You have to think it out. You have to think about a strategy. But for the single women who choose to be in abusive relationships, that kind of like what was going on in your life prior to that, because you definitely need to be out as soon as possible. You know, you take one step, God will give you the other 10 steps.
One day at a time,
Yeah.
but when you're going through it, sometimes it's hard to see the
It's
bigger
hard
picture.
to see, yeah,
So,
the road, yeah,
it's tough,
the
but
road ahead.
we got to keep going.
Yeah.
One thing I want to talk about, because like I think that moment says a lot about like just who you are and like your job. Because a lot of times a publicist, right, your job is to go to people's space and make them feel good, make them feel seen, manage their narrative, protect their images. But what happens when something painful happens to you? Like, what happens when you are facing these things and yet you still have to show up and people
Show up for
still
work,
expect you to be professional? People still want to tell you about their needs, which in your brain could be something as simple as, why is my drink not here? Like, why is this not here before I go on stage? And you like, do you know what I'm dealing with, right? Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, and I know you talked about some very personal things. Sorry, trigger one here, like your mother fighting breast cancer and
Yes.
you losing a child during that time. You just talked about you
Yes.
not having a child. Like, how were you able to, one, talk a little bit about those two experiences and how it shaped you, but also how do you still do your job and show up for others when you are going through so much?
I think that, well, like for example, when I was working with Chris Brown and Arian Simone for his MTV My Sweet 16, I knew that I was pregnant. But I knew that there were some issues happening with the pregnancy. And I was just like, if I can just look into that after the taping, after the taping, let me just get through it. No one knew that I was pregnant, and it wasn't something that I wanted to discuss because, in this industry, or maybe even in any industry, when people look at, if people try to chip away at one weak aspect of you, to see if they can get over on working and stuff like that. And so I just wanted to just button up and be really tight about that. And I think I lost the baby the day after the taping. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and I was in the hospital, I think, for like 2 weeks. And it took another 6 weeks to recover from that, and then back up and working.
I know that's tough, and I apologize that you had to go through that. I know your faith is important to you. You talked about that a lot.
Yes, my faith is extremely important. Just having, PTSD from the domestic violence situation, working with artists, being in hip hop, there's a fine line between legal and illegal. It's basically the legal drug game, So I've always had my head on a swivel. My grandparents on both sides of my family have always been God-fearing people. And it wasn't until China and Don Poo's mom gave me a mini Bible, and she was like, read Psalm 91 every day, read Psalm 138 every day. And every day for the rest of my life, even to this day, I read those every single day. So that gives me the grounding. You have to put on the full armor of God. And if I ever have a really, really, really bad day, it's because I forgot to read. But now my prayer life is way more extensive than that. So there's not really a lot that can penetrate me anymore, because once you have put on that full armor and the breastplate of God, and you have that word buried down on the inside of you, a lot of the emotions that the typical person would normally have, I don't have.
Yeah. I want to know, like, you're in a very secular industry, right? Like, industry where people might say spiritual principles or the environment that you're probably in, as far as clubs and stuff like that, might not honor a lot of faith practices. As a publicist and one who does their job well, how do you balance, being spiritual and being God and still trying to navigate these environments where things may happen that you can't control, you're not a part of, but it just comes with you being in those environments?
Yeah. So now I'm in a process where God is removing me from nightlife obligations. My current client roster, I know is handcrafted by God. My entire client roster is filled with God-fearing, well-rounded clients in the entertainment industry who are making their transitions out of the entertainment industry. So as they go and grow, I'm going and growing with them as well. So we all have one foot in the door, one foot out of the door in entertainment right now.
Yeah. And one thing I wanted to bring up, I know we talked a little bit about you not finishing Howard, but please tell them what you did. Like, you know.
Oh yeah, so 20 years later, on my grandmother's deathbed, she made me promise that I would finish college, and so I did. I went back to City College. I went to City College. I graduated in 2017 with a bachelor's degree in arts and sciences, and I was just like, all right, I did it, because at the end of the day, education does not ensure success. You have to have heart, and you have to have discipline, and you have to have a lot of hustle. And shortly after I got that degree, Delaware State called me and asked me if I wanted to teach PR, and I was like,
"Oh, Professor
wow.
Hobson,
Yes.
So how was it like teaching? Like, what was that process like?
It was an amazing experience because I know that I got that experience, as a reward for me finishing my degree. Because when I went to go fill out my paperwork at Delaware State, they were like, "We forgot to ask you if you have your degree. We can't give you this job if you don't have your degree." And I was like, I just graduated last month.
Look at God, though. We just talked about faith and look at God.
And that's how I got the job. Yeah.
They were literally waiting for you.
They were waiting for me. Yeah. And my students today are successful in marketing, in entertainment, and PR and stuff like that. And I keep up with them.
You wrote Diary of a Hip Hop Publicist, and people always want to know how you made it look so easy. But I know it wasn't easy.
It was not easy.
Your story. But writing a book sometimes can be complicated. Sometimes people want to protect their seekers, protect their careers, protect the things they see.
Yes.
Make sure that as a publicist, you're being very careful with the client line of what you can say and what you need to keep to the chest. Talk to me about that process of writing the book and going through that and saying, "Hey, I want to be a professor. I want to share my knowledge. I want all publicists to have this knowledge and help people. I want to help women like me understand that they can dominate this profession." Talk to me about that whole process.
Yes, so it all started back from my childhood. My father making us, look in the mirror, and he would say, "What's happening?" And he would make us say, "Me, like I'm what's happening." And I could not, because I was always traveling with artists, I couldn't always do those affirmations and stuff in the mirror, but I remembered what he instilled in me. And so I always traveled with a notebook, taking notes and journaling. And I said one day, you know what, I'm gonna turn this into a book. And so the book, The Diary of a Hip Hop Publicist, is about my life as a publicist and having to show up to work with a smile on my face despite everything I have going on in the backdrop of my life. Just having to button up and show up and make things happen for other people. There's a lot of drama with that. There's a lot.
I heard through the grapevine that a second installment is coming in May of 2026.
Yes. So, we're gonna do a second edition because when I wrote that first edition, that was from the beginning of my life up until 2012 after the domestic violence incident. But we're in 2026 now. 14 years later, when I wrote that book, I was like, this is gonna be my Beyonce moment, my mic drop, and I'm gonna just ride off into the sunset. But hip hop is like an addiction, you know what I mean? Like you just can't walk away from a culture that, I've helped create and helped build. It's like, oh, what am I gonna do? Oh, I'm gonna keep going. And, I'm in love with this, the evolution of it, the culture creation of it. I love it.
It's so funny. You talked about having clients now that understand faith-based and understand the morals that you're trying to bring into this industry. Talk about Money, Lynn, and Friends and that, Christian-based community for entrepreneurs that you have created.
So Money, Lynn, and Friends was, it came about because during the pandemic, my PR company basically tanked because no one wanted to pay a publicist. We didn't even know what was going to happen the day after, so my retainer slowly stopped. And so I said, well, I don't know how I'm going to make a living. And I was like, oh, I have my book. I dusted my book off and started selling it on Instagram. And, I don't know if you guys remember, but we had like curfews. We couldn't be outside past a certain time. So I would go outside and sell my book. And then I would have these underground pop-up shops and other people. I sell candles, I sell jewelry. And I started having pop-up shops that went from 5 vendors, 20 vendors, to full-blown expo at 200 vendors. I named that component Money, Lynn & Friends. I still have it to this day. It's an installation of blossoming billion-dollar businesses. They are entrepreneurs. They're 9-to-5ers now because they all went back to work, but they still have their businesses on the side. And I'm turning it into a faith-based community of entrepreneurs.
I've seen many times you have created pop-up shops and expos across New York City. I know a lot of people are like, oh, I got pop-up shop, but one of the things I always say that's very important is that what you're doing is creating economic infrastructure for small businesses. And I want to know for you, which is something very important to me, always, helping our neighbors and making sure small business survive. This is what makes New York City a great place. How does that make you feel that you have been able to create the resume where you could bring people together and you could create opportunities for people that look like you, especially?
It feels really good because Money, Lynn & Friends is an accumulation of all of my relationships. When my entrepreneurs need something, it feels good to be, because I make it so that I've never asked my colleagues for anything, but I'll do anything for my entrepreneurs. They'll need an influencer, a celebrity to wear their product, someone to try their perfume scent, someone to put on their fitness gear. And it's the perfect marriage between hip hop and community and entrepreneurship. And it's like a win-win for everyone because those hip hop artists are now influencers, and those influencers need other streams of income because this whole streaming, how are we gonna make our money, is that math ain't mathin'. And so it's a great supplement for them too.
Yeah. You are a publicist, a professor, a survivor, a founder, author, and a woman of faith, all at the same time. What is the thread that connects all of that together?
The thread that connects all of that together is God. He tells me to go and I go. Go here, go do this, connect this person with this person. It's an instinct that I've developed over time, throughout the period of developing my relationship with God. It's an ongoing process. It's like it's levels to it, okay?
I got one more question for you.
Yes.
What do you want people to watch this interview to walk away with?
What I want people to walk away with is to know that God is real. And leaving a legacy is not about leaving something for people. It's about leaving something inside of people. And a lot of people get that wrong. I'm working for legacy. Like, what, so you can just leave somebody some money, some property or something? What are you instilling in them? And so it's about what am I leaving inside of people, and that is that God is real and Jesus is real. And if you just try him a little bit every day and take a step with God and walk with God and try to listen to his voice every day, your life will get easier.
Lynn Hobson, thank you so much, and I appreciate you.
Thank you.